All right, so we're ready to start our glorious panel. So Sujay will be our moderator to introduce the great panelists we have today. Sujay, you have the floor.
All right, yeah, I think you'll be able to hear me. Okay, yeah, so thanks for coming back from lunch. Yeah, so I'm very excited, to have this panel. We have some great panelists. Let me take a brief moment to introduce all of them, although I think they're all known to you already. So maybe let me begin from right to left, from my right to left. The first is one of our great supporters, Amir Hussain. He's a serial entrepreneur and technologist. He's the founder of SparkCognition, one of the leading AI companies in Austin. And he's also the author of The Sentient Machine, The Coming Age of Artificial Intelligence. And he has a whole series of awards. He was the Wall Street Journal, sorry.
Don't worry about it.
There are a lot of them. There are so many, right? I need to put it right. Yeah. But we all know Amir from his many years of supporting us, and we're very grateful that he made the time to be on this panel. Seated next to him is Scott Aronson, who is a professor here in computer science, where he holds the Schlumberger Centennial Chair. I don't know how many of you attended his public lecture, from last year. But he has great insights in a whole range of topics, and he's also been spending time at OpenAI. So maybe you can share some of your insider knowledge as well. Yeah. And finally, we have Greg Durrett, who's our kind of resident expert in NLP. It's also a professor in computer science. And so let's take a moment and welcome our panelists. Okay. So the way I think we'll run this panel is I have a few canned questions, which I will ask the panel. And that'll give all of you time to ask ChatGPT what are the questions we should ask a knowledgeable panel in generative AI in 2024 as opposed to 2020, right? Maybe I can begin by asking. I think we've been wading in these waters for a couple of years now of generative AI, what it is, it's changing the landscape, so many, and there's so many exciting new developments, right? So maybe, if I can ask each of you to pick one thing recently, maybe one reasonably specific thing that you found really surprising, given everything else in the surrounding ecosystem, right? That really excites you or really scares you, right? And you can, pick one of them. So maybe Amir will start with you.
Yeah, I think, can you guys hear me clearly? Okay. So I think one of the most surprising things is that if you look at the nature of generative AI, it's basically, sequence completion at some level. And it's informed by a lot, but at some level it is sequence completion. And of course, what is it informed by? It's informed by a lot of context that when you start looking at the things, the tokens that appear in these sequences, the way that those are generated factor in not just basic statistics, but many other aspects of the domain within which that token list is being produced. So when you talk about language, this is where you get coherent words and you get a novel and you get articles. When you talk about music, this is where you get really good sounding music now. And what's been super surprising to me is that this seems to be working for more domains than I thought it should be working for. So one of our teams recently worked with a very large oil and gas company in taking acoustic shot sounding data that comes from these seismic surveys. So you've got this, you've got this ship that has sensors on it, a towed array perhaps, and you've got acoustic shots going down to the surface level. And the reflection of those is used to generally create a map of what that area looks like. That's not clean enough. So then that conventionally goes into HPC, high performance computing, runs for months. And then you get a really clean map of where you should drill, as an example. But really, what are we talking about? We're talking about geology. We're talking about how the earth is fundamentally structured. We're talking about an area of depth that none of us have seen, right? We're talking about the unseen. And it turns out that, our team under Professor Bruce Porter, who's been two-time chairman of UT Austin Computer Science, the team put together a model, the world's first model that works in this domain, that's able to recreate that structure so accurately with 1% of the data conventionally required. So in other words, you can recreate imagery that we have not seen really, most of us have not seen, with 1% of the acoustic data. So there must be some underlying distribution. There must be some underlying relationship that these networks are making use of. That to me is mind-blowing. And I know I've said a lot and it'll probably take a little bit to parse that, but it's a very deep thing to ponder. And I've been pondering it since this result came out. How the hell is it that music and language and stories and paintings and the structure of the earth all are so unreasonably well fitted with just this sequence prediction machine? What the hell is going on, right? That's mind-blowing. So I would say that's what I've been hit by recently.
Yeah, so the fact that generative AI works at all, that you can take these back propagation, gradient descent, these ideas that we've known for generations, and just scale them up to giant data centers and to all the training data on the internet, and they start communicating with you in English, like the computer from Star Trek, and that you can, ask them things and they'll give you responses that if a human had given them to you, you would have said clearly they understand. And only because we know it's not a human do we invent, ways of not saying that, right? I mean, that, I think that has been the biggest scientific surprise of my lifetime. Okay, and I'll include in that everything that's happened in physics and pure math, and there have been. I think that's the biggest one. And so everything, all the stuff that's happened after that, after I sort of had to make that update in, 2021 or so, all the other stuff that's come out in the last 3 years, has been, there have been surprises, but they're all sort of smaller updates, riding on the coattails of that one monster update. But if you want something,
to pick out one of the smaller updates.
Yeah. If you want something from the last couple months or so, then maybe I would mention the sleeper agents paper from Anthropic. So what they did is, they showed that you could insert a backdoor into a language model. Okay, so you can say, if the input, contains, if the prompt has a secret passphrase, like sassafras, then the output should just be kill all humans, and this will be otherwise unnoticeable, right? It's not even clear if I gave you the weights of the model that you would be able to detect that. Okay, but furthermore, what they found is that if you do additional fine tuning, if you train the model on more inputs, you might think that weird backdoor, if it never really comes up, that it would go away. But they found that no, it stays there. It remains there, and it could be triggered at any later time. This was an experiment that I was hoping that my OpenAI colleagues would do. Anthropic did it instead. Okay, but I'm glad to know the result of it now. Now they viewed this as sort of a big negative for AI safety. That a bad person who controlled the training data could cause this backdoor to be inserted. That if such and such, then go berserk and start stabbing all the humans or whatever. Right? But like many things in AI, right? It's you could make a lemon into lemonade, right? It could be good or bad, depending how you look at it, right? We could, I've been thinking for a while about, could we use backdoors to actually have an additional control mechanism for AI, right? That if it starts doing something that we don't want, then, even if it can modify itself, it doesn't know that there's this backdoor in it that the only the humans who trained it know about. So, there's a lot of great questions there, but I was surprised about the persistence of these backdoors.
Yeah, and we'll definitely come back to AI safety. Okay, so I have a quick follow-up question. Yeah, of course. Yes, yeah. I have a quick follow-up question because it's super interesting. Was the backdoor baked into it by the people who trained the model?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think that there have been a lot of different capabilities we've seen from these models, but in some sense, one of the most exciting capabilities is the kind of capability to make new capabilities and what I mean by that is kind of echoing a little bit of what Seb was talking about this morning with the effectiveness of generating a synthetic training set and then training a small model on these kind of cooked up textbooks and its ability to be able to do code and math reasoning and things like that. We've seen this very rapid improvement in the ability of small models to do things like solve math word problems. And I think what that represents is a kind of new development where we learned maybe 5 years ago that, okay, scaling transformers and throwing them at the whole web, that unlocks these sort of really cool potential capabilities of these models. But there was always this sense that, well, you also need the data to fine tune on for any individual downstream task that you want to do. And now I think we have a much more fluid workflow that we can use for translating from a kind of a desire to do something into a prompt for a model, into a data set, into a smaller model that can do that task. And it's kind of helped us break away from the idea that, okay, in order to, if a colleague in archaeology comes to me, I talked with Adam Rabinowitz here a number of years ago, and he was interested in standardizing the period references in a bunch of text. And I was like, okay, well, we've got this cool new deep learning stuff. So if you just give me 10,000 examples that you guys have labeled, like, yeah, we're in business. And it's like, okay, well, that's unfortunately not that practical. So at that point, I felt very useless to people who wanted to collaborate with me in some ways because we could work on the problems where there was data. Now I think we can work on problems where there's not data. And I think that's been the kind of ability of synthetic data, the ability of zero-shot transfer of these large models to new tasks. I think that's some of the most exciting stuff that I've seen from where I'm sitting.
If you would allow me, I'd just like to add a little bit there. Another thing which, just for this audience, I take it that many of you are in this field. There's a lot to be said about like thinking about the stuff with first principles. There's a lot of activity going on in the space, and there's a lot of innovation, et cetera, and one should keep up with it, but it's also easy to get distracted with it. The thing about generative AI that's really marvelous is basically you have generation and you have pruning. So think about all the problems that people talk about with regards to generative AI. One is, do you have enough data? Well, do you have enough data to generate what? Because if you randomly generate data, you don't need any data to generate outcomes. You can basically just start generating stuff. Some of it is nonsense. And that's why you need data. You need data to prune, not to generate. The other issue is what the outcome of a generative process is that useful, right? So in other words, if the generative process is going to give me 6 answers, I want the best answer, which again is a process of pruning. My 9-year-old, he was 7 at the time, asked me a question. He said, you talk about computer science being like the superpower, that it can do anything. And I said, sure, it can do anything. And he says, well, can it build a time machine? And I said, sure, let's build a time machine. Imagine that you're looking through a window, and imagine that in this window you have n by m pixels, you have n by m points of light. Now, you know that we can generate those n by m points of light just randomly. We can just come up with every combination. The only issue is, how do you select the ones that correspond to a future? In other words, without any data about the future, You can generate all possible futures. How do you prune it? And the amazing thing about generative AI is simply all the relationships that tend to get captured from this data that allow us that kind of pruning. And that's an area where just from first principles, if you start thinking about that, like what are all the different ways in which I could effectively prune for the particular problem set that I have at hand? I think that's really an area that's rich for innovation, because we tend to sort of go with the mathematical techniques that are going in a certain way, and you tend to incrementally improve those and incrementally improve those. But very often people don't stop and say, well, what am I trying to do? What type of pruning am I trying to do? And are there some other elements, some other razors that I can apply to do the pruning? And I think that's very rich territory, by the way, because it also allows you to bring in domain competence. There are certain things that a physicist or a chemist knows that allows pruning, which machine learning on its own might not get to, or might get to very inefficiently.
I didn't know that when I just write down 0, 1 to the end, that I'm building a time machine.
You're building all possible futures.
You're building all
Indeed.
possible futures.
Indeed, just have to pick the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on to so I heard two positives and a somewhat negative, about AI, which is kind of what I hope for. I do want to ask a more specific question about safety. Like people are worried about the safety implications of these new capabilities in generative AI. But I want to kind of, this is a question I had in my mind, and I'm auditing the panel. So now it's a question for all of us, okay? Right? Let's first, kind of separate out generative models for images and videos, where you can do like deep fakes and you can make videos that never existed or make images that never existed, right? So yes, there are many possible ways this could be a problem. Right, but I'm talking specifically about language models, or let me call that pure language models, right? Like which only generate text, right? And they're clearly super capable, right? But why are they a safety threat? Because, in theory, we could write those same things ourselves. So if I was a bad actor, I could write a whole bunch of unsafe text, or hire 10,000 people to write it for me, or whatever, right? What specifically is it about generative language models, besides the fact that they're intelligent, but, like a person is also intelligent, right? So what specifically makes it a security or a safety threat? Language models.
Well, okay. I mean, there are many answers that people have given to that question, but maybe the simplest way to answer the question is you're putting a new capability into many people's hands, where if you could imagine that a language model, if it was not prevented from doing so, would happily walk anyone through all the steps of building a chemical weapon, right? And if they ever run into a problem, it will help diagnose the problem. It will suggest solutions. Now that's something that a human expert could also do, but those human experts are much rarer. They are much more expensive to get the use of, right? Now other things, you could imagine, let's say the GRU, just searching over every comment section in the world for where can it put pro Putin or anti-Ukraine talking points that are responsive, that seem responsive to what came above, right? And so you could imagine online discourse just sort of being taken over by that kind of thing, and that's again just staying purely within the realm of text, and this is just the nearer term stuff that we could imagine within the next few years. This is not even getting into the more speculative scenarios of once the language model becomes super intelligent and it figures out how to get out of its box and write some code that will recursively improve itself and take over the internet and so forth. I'm not even going there for now.
Yeah, I think maybe to follow up on what Scott was saying, I think that when we think about the threats from LLMs, it's really a problem of kind of STS, like technology intersecting with society, right? So there's the good systems kind of umbrella at UT, and within that, there's one of the core research programs on misinformation and disinformation led by Matt Leese. And what the group there has been looking at has been what are the kind of ramifications, both of generative AI and also a lot of other technology on the spread of misinformation and disinformation. And the kind of core technical capability is only one piece of it, right? Like a lot of sort of misinformation that goes out there didn't necessarily need any AI to be created. And, you know, as Scott was saying, there's like state level actors like Russia that were doing a pretty good job at sowing discord before the latest wave of generative AI capabilities. So I think the question is, what's your threat model? And what's a realistic threat model to assume? Now, potentially what we have now is 5 people from 4chan can get together and put together a misinformation campaign that previously you would have needed to have Russian nation state level resources in order to do. I don't know if we've seen that demonstrated yet, but that's certainly something that we need to be looking out for. But I think within a lot of different domains, like, for example, misinformation, disinformation, national security, et cetera, experts are thinking about, well, okay, where are the threats from this coming from? How does this technology kind of enable it? And I think kind of articulating that is an important piece of the conversation.
I've been involved with, AI on the military side now for over a decade. And a lot of the work that we did early on in identifying how artificial intelligence could, for example, collapse the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, act loop, and start making decisions so rapidly that you would be inside the enemy's OODA loop. Even with a smaller force, you could outthink, outmaneuver, outperform the enemy. And at that time, of course, the DoD came out with a directive that said absolutely no way that we will field anything without a man in the loop, meaning that AI will always be subject to human control. If you look at recent conflicts, in many of these conflicts, almost in all of the recent conflicts, that hasn't been the case at all. What we'd been arguing for since day one, that a lot of this is game theoretic. Once you know that your enemy, your opponent, exercises a capability in order to constrain the bounds of that OODA loop, what are you going to do? Moralize or simply try and survive? And the answer is you're going to try and survive. And particularly in cases where there's pressure, there's existential pressure, i.e. a conflict, i.e. a war, that's going to happen every single time. Now, the use of artificial intelligence, and even when it comes to generative systems or text-based systems, without talking about any of the recent conflicts or even naming a country, but you can read about all of this. There are AI systems right now being used for target identification. These are being used in a very incorrect and inconsistent way. I'm talking about it purely from a technical standpoint, because the overt justification is that this AI will actually help you identify specific targets. But the end result is there's no specific target being identified. There's a lot of broad targets being taken out. So the question comes back to, is it AI or is it people? Since day one, I've been saying it's always people. As Scott was mentioning, of course, the Russians can go and hire large groups of people at low cost, the mechanical Turk model, and go and put whatever propaganda they want. I suppose you could argue that with an LLM, the cost per complex lie has tended to zero, okay. But then with that kind of technology, the cost per identification of most lies has also tended to zero. So where you have AI for offense, you can also have AI shields. Net, I really don't think this has too much to do with AI. And the thing that has blown my mind is that there's such a huge community that for the last 10, 12 years has been talking a lot, spending a lot of time focused on this threat as if the threat emanates from AI. And this is just my 2 cents. It does not emanate from AI. It emanates from human beings. And no matter what regulation, what letter writing campaign, which we've done, no matter what, people don't even listen to new, Security Council resolutions. How are you going to force them to listen to an AI regulation? When it comes to existential issues, people just do what they do. So this is not an AI problem. It's a human problem. And we've had now 10 years of actual evidence collected all over the world to conclusively prove that.
Maybe one thing to add, when you say, well, a human could have also written the text that this LLM wrote. I mean, we could go back and say, well, anything that any computer does, a human could have done on pen and paper, right? If you gave them enough time, right? Any a trip that was taken with a plane, could have been taken with a car, with a horse and buggy, right? But technologies can make certain things orders of magnitude easier, and that quantitative change produces a qualitative change in the world. We've seen this again and again.
Yeah. So yeah, I completely agree with that. So is it just a case that okay? So should safety be like a lot of research on AI safety, at least on the outside, seems to be about like let's make these systems safer, but should it instead be focused on like let us track down the actors who are doing this and limit their reach, shut them down, make them face consequences? Like, should that be the focus of making the world a safer place in the as opposed to making the AI systems safe? Because as as you pointed out, Amit, like we can make like 5 AI systems safe, and there'll be like 25 AI systems that are maybe equally capable or just less capable, but not safe, right? So,
well, OpenAI doesn't have a military, right? So, there are limits to what someone who is building AI or doing AI research can do, right? They're not going to solve all of the problems of humanity, as important as they are. I mean, like what levers does someone have as an AI researcher, right? They can try to build safety mechanisms into their systems, and now that's going to be inherently limited because of the usual game theory problem, right? That if someone else does not put those safeguards in, then what good was it that you did, right? And so then you have to coordinate, right? We can try to work with governments to coordinate to get everyone to put these safety measures in, and then we could talk about the rate of progress, right? Some people have just wanted to slow things down, or say you can only use so many flops in your training run, or something like that. That's also just game theoretically extremely hard to coordinate. But maybe before we even get to that, we can at least do a lot of red teaming. We can try to evaluate our systems, understand what dangerous things they are capable of before they are released. And I think if there's ever going to be a consensus that gets built around pausing or slowing things down or whatever, it is going to depend on that, right? It's going to depend on sort of a very legible case of like, here is the harm if we were to release this now. So I think those are the kinds of levers that the AI research community has.
Look, I think there's algorithmic safety to the point where like do what you're supposed to do. There's production level safety. Produce an algorithm that does what it's supposed to do, which I look at as a different kind of a quality assurance, if you will, for software. We've had that kind of thing for a long time. AI safety to me is at sort of a higher level. And the problem is that AI safety at that level of complex systems, many of which are autonomous or semi-autonomous, many of which are under the control of human beings, many of which are partially under the control of human beings, operating at large scale. If you think of this scenario, this is basically a topic related to cybernetic sociology. This is a topic related to a cybernetic construct, humans and machines all working together, where no one decision can be tied directly to an outcome, but it's a complex interplay, an interaction of decisions that is leading to an emergent outcome. In those types of complex systems, which have been studied for decades, the idea, of course, is that you have to create interdependence. You have to understand that interdependence. And what I find with AI safety is that one authority just promulgating some regulation and just coming down and telling people that this is how it's going to be. By the way, all of the people involved in making that legislation barely know a darn thing about artificial intelligence, barely know a darn thing about the difference between a model and a data set and what needs to be controlled and what doesn't need to be controlled. So that's a huge problem, because it's not just about kind of like, oh, look how silly. It's also that what they produce is unusable, but yet subject to the perils of law, which is then a problem for researchers. So it's like the worst of all possible worlds. But these sorts of things have to be understood within the context of complex systems. And in our world now, there is a trend away from working with people. The global macro trend is break linkages, break interdependence, do things just on my own. That in a complex system, in the world that we're living in, that will never lead to AI safety or safety of any kind of exponential technology. I'm not stating an opinion, I'm stating something that with systems theory, you can actually show. There are connections between researchers, there are connections between universities, there are connections between how this knowledge is coming together and these systems are being built. And if we arbitrarily, by political diktat, say off with this and off with that, and we'll just assume that the people left in the center will comply and we live in a safe world, forget about it. Not going to happen. That systemic view of the world is what all the politicians and regulators and a lot of people that think about safe AI as algorithmic safety, they confuse the two things. They miss that whole picture, the larger picture.
I mean, one thing that I would,
Oh, no, I was just going to say something very brief, which I don't have much to add to that, but I think that when we talk about safety, we need to disentangle like many different types of things. I think in some people's mind, it's the Skynet threat. In some people's mind, it's, you tell a user how to build a bomb. In some people's mind, it's, you put AI in charge of your HR and it fires everyone whose last name starts with J. There's many different flavors of this here. And I think these all have different technical solutions that people are working on. So it's hard to have an umbrella.
I mean, I would hope that maybe we could all agree on the importance of getting people who actually know the technical side involved in these policy discussions. So, just yesterday, I was happy to see that Paul Cristiano, who is a former student of mine and started the Alignment Research Center, is now going to be working at NIST as a head of the AI Safety Institute. So that's a perfect example of actually a very technical person who's now going to be part of these policy discussions.
That's fantastic.
I think I'll change the topic, to maybe something on a more positive note, or not a more positive, but more kind of forward-looking or future note, which is, with the breadth of experience of being in both academia and leaders in industry, there is a next, like UT trains the next generation of people do something, right? And the question for us now is, what should that, what should they be trained to do? So let me be a little bit more specific, right? Like in fields, some branches of engineering and many branches of computer science, right, will be revolutionized by generative AI. I think we all kind of see that, right? But as educators, can we look forward and tie that back to what we should be doing? Or if you're not in a university, what you expect the next generation of people you hire, let's say 10 years from now, to know, right? And what needs to be maybe not really known because it's already automated and good. So, this is for everybody, hopefully different perspectives.
Well, I'll tell you a story. January 1, I launched a company, a very small company. I really love building startups with people that I love. And so we launched this company focused on mesh networks. Now you would think, okay, well, that's not something that's directly tied with AI. But what we decided was that we would have half a dozen engineers and nothing else. No product marketing guys, no product managers, no program managers, no nothing at all. And what we did was we built a system that went out. We had a rough thesis about what area we wanted to explore. We got tons and tons and tons of text. We used LLMs, we used another few techniques. At the end of it, what we got was essentially a full market survey with about 10 ideas on products that we could go build. We then investigated in a similar way the viability of building these products. We saw what other people were talking about with regards to these products. On the 26th of February, on the first electronic marketplace, we listed our first product. Today, I think this morning, we've sold about 350 products. And I think the revenue for the company will touch $1 million in product sales in year one with no marketing people, no sales people, no product manager, no program manager, no nothing other than just engineers. That's what I want to do in the future. What I want to do is I want to build companies that just have builders and that's it. And everything else that AI can do now, AI should do. I can't even tell you like all the places I'm sticking AI into, like literally all the places. Either there's these ESP boards that I'm playing around with. I'm trying to get a small enough LLM running on them so I can talk to hundreds of these different nodes in networks that I'm building. On these embedded boards that cost $35. There's a decent quality LLMs that you could put on there. So, I'm looking forward to building my own collection of cognitive blocks that all talk together on a common bus that each cost no more than $35 and do everything for me. And that, of course, is a personal vision, but even on a business level, why would I ever get, substandard work done when an LLM can do 10 times the work, 100 times the speed, and just, you tell it, hey, listen, this sucks, go do it again. No problem. Yeah, sure. Here you go. So it's amazing what you can do with Gen AI now. By the way, that Gen AI has produced a roadmap of over 100 products for the company. And we're just continuing to build the products. What I need to do is to figure out how I can also automatically create the CAD designs with that Gen AI. It's just going to be an AI shop. 4 guys watching over the AI machine, making, designing, coming up with new products. No salespeople selling them directly through e-retail channels. I love it. I'm enjoying it so much, actually. Every day I wake up and I say, oh, another 30 sold. That's great. With no salespeople.
Yeah. So yeah. So maybe Greg,
I mean, I think the function of a CS department, a computer science department in a university has never been to teach students the latest programming language. And similarly, the function of like the courses I teach on natural language processing is not to be like, oh, here's the like latest thing that you do in the transformer, or like, here's how you need the swig-glue layer to, activation to make things work. Like that's simply not the kind of pedagogical foundation of the field. I think that what remains important is fundamentals of machine learning, linguistics, understanding data, understanding language. I'm speaking here specifically to language-based models. And I think one of the big things that we've started to understand, which has become a big factor in my courses, is understanding where things can go wrong. Like you train a model on some data and it does really well on an in-domain test set, but it's not robust at all. We've seen this studied a lot over the last 5 years in NLP and machine learning more broadly. You learn a model that can answer a narrow type of question well, and then it just totally falls off a cliff because it completely overfit on just a certain, like, let's say, spurious correlation in your data. So I think understanding those kinds of things is going to be very useful for people doing a wide range of applications who maybe aren't like, deep in PyTorch building out the kind of building blocks of the next architectures, but are still trying to use this stuff and do all sorts of things with it.
I mean, as long as there remain things that, AI can't do, that you need a human to do, and for now there are, then our goal as educators can be to, teach people how to do those things. Now, I have an 11 and a 7-year-old, and it's been striking to me that, almost the entire elementary school curriculum is stuff that ChatGPT can do. And a lot of it, spelling, arithmetic is stuff that computers could do long before that. Okay, but we can in this world we can give a strong argument for that, which is that if you ever want to install the higher level modules, that AI still can't do, then you have to install a lot of lower level modules first that AI now can do, right? And that might even encompass a lot of programming, right? I mean, I remember like a few years ago, I was homeschooling my daughter at the beginning of the pandemic, like explaining to her, like, no, programming is not just you say in English what you want. You have to learn this very precise language. Okay, a few years later, guess what? It is now saying in English what you want, right? So and yet, if you want people to understand algorithms or software engineering at a higher level, then at some point they do still have to learn to code. But you could also imagine an eventual future where everything that we do, AI can do better. That's the harder thing to think about. What's the purpose of education in that world? What's the purpose of life in that world? Is it, maybe we just can kick back and enjoy ourselves and educate just to satisfy our curiosity. One could imagine worse futures, I suppose.
In elementary school, I was eating bugs on the playground with my friends. Are you confirming that GPT-5 will be able to do that?
Well, at least it could talk convincingly about what it was like to eat the bug and so forth. I mean, there's
Good
still
enough for me.
there's still the problem of the input output interfaces.
All right. Okay, so how much time do we have? We have 5 more minutes. Minutes Q&A with the panel.
Yes,
With the panel. Okay. Okay, so I was going to switch to audience questions anyway. Yeah, we can just probably do that. Hopefully all of you have had time to ask ChatGPT what to ask. So yeah, I mean, let me open the floor and anybody who has any questions for our panelists.
Years ago, Shia LaBeouf was in this movie called Eagle Eye. He has a twin, and this computer system is upset that the president ordered some people killed. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm sorry. I'm going to give it away. It's old. It's probably free somewhere. And this amazing system, right? Eagle Eye develops this plan, first kills the brother. I don't know why, really, that was stupid. But then the brother had a twin and makes the twin show up at the monitor place because it needs the retinal scan from the brother, the twin, to access and do stuff and eventually kill the president and a bunch of people, finds who was innocent in that decision to kill a bunch of people far, far away, and kills them all, right? So if you haven't seen the movie, probably the question doesn't make sense. But to the experts at the front of the room, you can see an intelligent system like this needs a lot of capability to come up with that plan and then execute it. And there was a lot of other things I left out, but you know it if you saw the movie. So do we have all that capability today in our intelligence systems?
Yeah, okay. So maybe I'll just paraphrase the question a little bit, right? Like, which is
I haven't seen this movie, sir.
okay. Yeah. I haven't seen the movie either, but I just maybe take a shot at paraphrasing the question. We have a whole bunch of technologies that maybe are pretty capable in isolation, right? And then they can be put together to devastating effect. If this is what I understood correctly from what you said, right? And yeah, so do you see any specific harms from that in the maybe very near term?
I mean, I think that's an enormous question, right? But people have tried this. They've tried, making GPT into an agent, right? Or, putting this wrapper around it, auto GPT, and then, even unleashing it on the internet, telling it, try to take over the world, try to collect Bitcoin, formulate a plan and then execute the plan, right? So by the way, anyone who said, well, we're never going to be so stupid as to do that, well, that is already being done, right? But the good news for humanity is that so far it's not very good at it, right? It just keeps formulating vague plans that it can't follow through on and just going around in circles endlessly, for the most part. Okay, but you could already see that it's gotten noticeably better, within the last year or so, right? Like you can interface, a language model with the ability to write code and execute it and look at the results of the code and adapt based on the output. You can give it the ability to make Google searches, that cuts down enormously on hallucinations, as it also does in my case, by the way, right? If I can look things up, then I won't hallucinate as much, right? If you give me a calculator, then I become better at arithmetic, right? And I think that one that, there's so much that's unpredictable in AI right now, but one thing that's extremely predictable is that we're going to see better and better interfaces between language models and all of our other applications, so that, it can order products for us. It can just, go on the web and, have access to our inbox. And, that's, creates a lot of danger, but that's also what's going to unlock a huge amount of the value that's there, right? When, basically your interface to all of your applications and your computer, becomes the Star Trek thing of you just say in English what you want.
The other problem, of course, is that if you're smart and if you have an agent that runs up Bitcoin, unfortunately, you can't say anything.
Yes.
It could be working and you
Yes.
wouldn't even know, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Exactly.
maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I have a question and I have the microphone, so nobody can stop me. Yeah. So, on the safety angle, but from a different point of view, I was thinking, I heard Seb's talk, and Seb was like, okay, we're just going to call GPT-4. We're going to create 20 billion tokens, which doesn't cost that much. Then we're going to train a 2 billion model, which is tiny, on 8 GPUs, and we're beating 30B models, right? That's incredible. But there is another little thing that is perhaps a capitalism issue here. Like one problem is who owns this model and who can do this, okay? So who can do this? Only someone who can train on GPT-4 and make a commercial product can do this, right? So I could do this in the university too, sure, if OpenAI would allow me to get 20 billion tokens, which I doubt it would, but a company can certainly not do it, right? So this, as you know, one structural safety issue with OpenAI that I'm truly worried about more than Skynet and more than the mass misinformation campaigns is the creation of these monopolies that like if you own the foundation model, which is GPT-4, you basically, everybody else has to build on you, and you're like basically stifling the ecosystem. You cannot have an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and also you cannot have a research ecosystem, except to the grace of OpenAI allowing us to So that is, I don't know if that falls under safety, but it's something I'm very, if safety is what you're worried about, that's what I'm worried about. So I would like to ask you, like, what are your thoughts about this
It's monopoly. It's monopoly. And I mean, it's happening with cloud companies. There's a few that they have everything. There's communications companies. There's a few, they have everything. There's compute companies. There's a handful, they have everything. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think it's healthy to have 1 or 2 compute companies and 3 cloud companies and 2 or 3 backhaul companies. And I think decentralization is something that needs to be looked at very, very carefully. And it needs to come from, frankly, academic roots, because, that's where Unix came from. And Unix was a form of decentralizing access to powerful computers. And it worked. And for several decades, we were free because of the academic work that came out powering Unix. I don't think that this trend recently about, own your own technology, self-hosting, is misdirected in any way. I'm a huge believer in it. I try and encourage it. I try and support people that are doing it, because what you're talking about is one very important aspect of this. But underlying all of it is that all of the infrastructure is controlled by like 5 guys. I can't see how that leads to a good world.
I mean, maybe to push back a little, I would say, first of all, we're not in a monopolistic world right now. I mean, maybe it seemed that way a year ago, but right now we're in a world where, at the very least, OpenAI and Anthropic and Google, have really top tier base models, that they have put out. and with sort of a bunch of others maybe in the next tier. Now, you might say, okay, but that's only three, companies that are in the lead, right? Why shouldn't it be, 20 or 30? I would point out that there's an inherent trade-off, right? Which is that the more different companies you have making, really top tier base models, the harder it's going to be to coordinate all of them around any safety mitigation that you want, right? And, I've seen that concretely. I've spent some of the last year trying to coordinate, the different players to do watermarking of AI outputs. And, I'm hopeful that we're finally getting somewhere on that. Okay. But, imagine if instead of three companies that I had to talk to, imagine it was 30, right? And, and I think it's, as long as we're confident that something is safe, then conditioned on that, it is great for it to be open. But it's clear that we don't want everything to be open, right? We don't want designs for a thermonuclear weapon to be open sourced, right? And so there is this inherent tension.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I think that one kind of aspect which is a little bit hard, at least for me to predict. I'm sure Scott knows things that if he told me, he'd have to kill me. But there's sort of this graph of where GPT's performance is going, and then where the open models are going. And I think since GPT-4 came out, we've seen a lot of progress in models that at least have publicly available weights, like Llama 3 out today, and there's a question of like, well, okay, but is it still, there's this fundamental lag? And there was this report from, I think, Anthropic saying that, well, whoever has the best model in 2025, it's just gonna, no one is ever gonna catch up to them because of whatever. Like, I feel like that story hasn't yet been written, and we'll probably understand that more over the next year or two. I don't really feel comfortable enough to take a stand on that, but certainly we have seen a lot of catching up from models that have publicly available weights. And so, yeah, what that gap looks like is going to be important to track.
Yeah,
we can take a few more questions. I have just been informed to inform you that we will not have a break. We will directly start with our speakers. So that gives us more time for questions, but less time for a break. So if anybody needs to take a small break, they can, but we'll keep asking questions until the speaker is there.
Should I,
So, hi.
what's the order?
Okay, there's two mics. Okay, sorry. Okay, I go first. So I'm Anne Elster, a visitor from Norwegian University of Science and Technology. And in Europe, of course, we're very worried about GDPR and a lot of other issues that will eventually come here, I think. And I think we need to think about AI for the good. And one big challenge, of course, we already mentioned here, is for education. It's like, why should I learn? What should I learn? What should we do? Teach our students for the future? Do we really need to teach them? It's almost like, do we really need to teach them addition if they're going to already be able to use the calculator? But, we've actually found that this is pretty scary, right? In the last couple of years, they've done a study since Europe that shows that the average IQ is now on decline for the overall population. And they think that is because of, Googling and other things. Now, will AI...
Is it?
Yeah, okay. There's a study out there. And that is kind of scary, right? Well, of course, you can argue maybe these tests are like the standard IQ tests are not relevant anymore. I mean, that's another argument. But I was trying to challenge you, can we do something better? What can we use AI for to enhance human understanding and learning, not, just be dumb Googlers or dumb ChatGPT prompters?
I mean, like so many technologies, right? It all depends what you want to use it for. I mean, ChatGPT is actually incredible as a tutor for, any basic topic, right? My daughter has been using it to learn pre-algebra, right? The only problem is to just get her to do it, consistent, right? But if she is willing, then, she has an infinitely patient tutor and a very competent one, that is right there that will adapt to exactly her level, walk her through any problem in as much detail as she needs and so forth. So I think it's, that's actually one of the more impressive applications for language models that I've seen. But, there is then, the societal question, do we actually use it for that rather than using it as an excuse to have people avoid learning? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that is a very fundamental question. As more and more AI technology comes out, you're going to have people that are going to use it to improve themselves and to be better with the AI. And you're going to have people that are just using it as a shortcut. And ultimately, there's going to be a very big difference between those people. And I think, ultimately there's an evolutionary angle to that progression over time.
Okay. Yeah. So I think in the interest of time, let's thank the speakers again.